The afternoon heat lay heavy on the savannah, pressing the grass flat until even the wind seemed unwilling to move. In a wide open stretch where motion usually meant life, antelopes threading through gold, birds lifting in quick arcs, one body stayed still. A lioness lay on her side, head slightly raised, eyes half-lidded. Her breathing came shallow and uneven, each inhale lifting her ribs a little before letting them fall back with a faint shudder. One hind leg was folded beneath her in the wrong shape, the joint bent at an angle that belonged to injury, not rest. The paw gave a small twitch and then went quiet. Flies hovered near her flank, landing and lifting again, testing the thin line between strength and surrender. She did not swat at them. She only blinked, slow and deliberate, as if every movement had to be chosen. Across the grass, a lone conservation worker approached with measured steps. No vehicle followed, no engines or dust clouds, only the soft parting of stems. The worker's shoulders stayed low, hands visible, posture calm. Someone who understood that rushing an exhausted predator could turn fear into flight, or into the last sharp reflex of defense. The lioness had been reported limping near a watering point the day before. Now she had stopped here, in open ground where she could see danger coming, even if her body could no longer answer it. The air around her carried a tense stillness. A lioness in pain could still be dangerous, not from anger but instinct. The worker halted at a respectful distance, allowing space to remain between them like a silent agreement. The lioness's ears shifted, first toward the human, then toward the horizon, listening for threats that might be closer than the one now visible. Her tail lay slack, its tip barely moving, a thin signal that she was awake, aware, and fighting to stay present. The worker watched her chest, counting the rise and fall, noticing how long the pauses lasted. Too close, and she might force herself upright and collapse farther from help. Too slow, and the shallow breathing could thin into something the body could not recover from. The worker lifted a small radio, pressing a button without speaking, sending a quiet alert for the veterinary team to move in without noise. A warm gust passed through, carrying dust and sun-baked earth. The lioness's nostrils flared, catching the human scent more fully now. Her eyes focused with tired attention, not soft, not welcoming, only honest. She measured the shape of the person, the distance, the intent. The worker lowered to one knee, making the body smaller, less threatening, and waited. "It's okay, girl," the worker murmured, voice barely above breath. The lioness did not relax. She did not need to. She only released a longer exhale, and her head sank until her chin rested in the grass. A faint rasp slipped from her throat, more air than sound, then faded. The worker stayed still, holding patience like a steady hand, knowing that the most dangerous part of rescue was not the moment of action, but the moment before it, when waiting too long could cost a life, and moving too soon could break the last trust left in her eyes. The worker stayed low in the grass and watched for changes that spoke louder than movement. The lioness still lay on her side, but her pain seemed deeper than the twisted hind leg. Her belly held tight, intense pulses, and every few minutes her flanks shivered as if a cold current passed through her body. She made almost no sound, saving energy because there was little left to spend. The heat pressed down, turning the air thick. Dust clung to her whiskers, and flies hovered at the corners of her eyes. She did not snap at them. Only her ears flicked now and then, tracking the human shape nearby. The worker shifted a hand slowly to the radio, sending a message for the veterinary team, then lowered it again, open and still. When the vehicle finally appeared at the edge of the plain, it approached slowly, creeping forward and stopping well short of her resting place. Doors opened gently. A veterinarian stepped out, followed by an assistant with a small kit and a folded canvas stretcher. No one spoke loudly. They came in a curve rather than straight on, giving her room to watch. Up close, the veterinarian saw how much effort each breath demanded. Her chest rose only a little, and her throat worked with every swallow. The injured leg was obvious, but the shape of her abdomen drew the eye too. Fuller than it should be, rounded in a way that suggested more than hunger. The lioness's belly tightened again, and her nostrils flared as if she were bracing against a wave of pressure. The team stopped outside her reach. The worker remained near her head, a familiar presence now, not touching, simply holding the space. The lioness's eyes stayed fixed on hands and knees, measuring distance, waiting for the moment that would decide whether she needed to fight or could afford to let go. The veterinarian crouched and assessed without contact first. The angle of the leg, swelling at the joint, the color of her gums when she briefly opened her mouth to pull in air. The lioness did not growl. She did not bare teeth. Her body looked too tired for threat, too focused on surviving each minute. "Easy, easy," the veterinarian breathed. A thin tremor ran along the lioness's flank, then stopped. Her tail tip moved once, slow and weak. The worker's shoulders stayed relaxed, gaze soft, never crowding her with direct challenge. The decision came quietly. Treatment required sedation, but sedation carried its own danger if she was pregnant. Too much could weaken her breathing and leave her body unable to protect what might still be developing inside. Too little could leave her awake enough to panic when hands finally lifted her. The veterinarian measured carefully, choosing the smallest margin that might bring relief without taking away control. The dart was delivered from close range, almost soundless. The lioness flinched, muscles tightening across her back. Her eyes sharpened with sudden alarm, and she tried to gather herself to stand. The broken leg betrayed her at once, folding wrong, dropping her back into the grass. For a moment her breathing sped, quick and shallow, the effort of fear added to pain. "It's all right," the worker whispered. No one moved in. They waited until the medicine softened her tension. Her eyelids sank, and the trembling in her flanks eased into a steadier rhythm. Only then did the team close the distance, hands gentle and deliberate, carrying the weight of two fragile hopes at once. Her survival and the possibility of life still held behind that tightened belly. Darkness settled slowly, draining color from the grass until the savannah became a wide field of shadow and dull bronze. The sky cooled into deep blue, and the air loosened its heat at last. Somewhere far out, a hyena called, then another answered, their voices carrying over the plain like ripples on still water. The veterinary team had withdrawn to the vehicle, leaving the lioness where she lay, watched from afar. The sedation had softened the sharpest sting of injury, yet it could not restore strength. Her breathing remained shallow, ribs lifting with effort before settling again. The worker stayed near her head, seated low in the grass, close enough to read her eyes, far enough to avoid forcing fear into her tired body. Wind slid through the stems and shifted without warning. Each change brought new scents: dust, dry earth, the faint musk of unseen animals. The lioness's ears followed those currents, turning toward the horizon, then back toward the worker, then outward again. Even weakened, she listened. Even injured, she kept watch. The cold deepened. Stars sharpened overhead, bright and indifferent. The grass whispered and bent, and insects made soft movements through the thatch. The hyenas continued their calling, rising and fading as if testing what the darkness might offer. They did not approach, not yet, but their presence pressed against the silence. The lioness did not try to flee. She could have dragged herself toward brush and cover, but she remained in the open, conserving what little energy she had. Her body was occupied with something deeper than escape. Every so often her belly tightened, drawing inward in a slow contraction that made her flanks tremble. At the peak she held her breath, then released it in a thin exhale that fluttered her whiskers. The worker leaned forward only slightly, careful not to touch, careful not to crowd. The lioness's eyes opened wider for a moment, catching the dim outline of the human shape. They did not soften into comfort, but they did not sharpen into threat. They were the eyes of an animal measuring risk against exhaustion, choosing stillness because it was all she had left. Hours moved on with the patience of night. The vehicle sat dark against the horizon, its engine quiet, its lights off. The team waited at a distance, ready to return if signaled, but unwilling to press their luck with her trust. What had begun as treatment had become a vigil, a careful offering of space. Near midnight her breathing changed. It quickened, then slowed into deliberate pulls as if she were drawing air with purpose. Her belly tightened more strongly now, the contractions closer together, no longer subtle. Her tail lifted slightly and fell again. A low rasp escaped her throat, no roar, no warning, only strain vanishing into the wind. "Easy," the worker whispered. The lioness's muscles gathered along her spine. Her shoulders pressed into the ground, claws flexing once in the soil. She could not rise, but she shifted into a new kind of effort, one that demanded focus beyond injury. The first unmistakable signs of labor had arrived in the rhythm of her abdomen, in the way she braced and released, in the heavy silence between breaths. The wind carried the scent of rain that never came, and the grass stayed dry. The hyenas called again, farther off, and the worker stayed where he was, offering nothing but steadiness as the night held its breath. The night thinned toward early morning, the sky paling at its edges while the land still held onto shadow. The wind had quieted, and with it the restless movement of the grass. Even the distant calls felt farther away now, as if the savannah itself had withdrawn to watch. The lioness lay in a low hollow of flattened stems, her body stretched long, her injured leg kept rigid and untouched. Every breath was an effort she had to earn. Her belly tightened again, stronger than before, the contraction pulling through her like a slow wave. Her flanks trembled, then stilled. She lifted her head slightly, chin shaking with fatigue, and her eyes searched the dim space in front of her. The conservation worker remained close, seated with knees drawn in, hands resting open on the ground. Nothing about his posture asked for control. It only offered presence. For a long time she had guarded herself with distance, a predator's instinct refusing help even when the body could no longer stand. But now exhaustion had peeled away the last layers of resistance. Not trust. Wild animals do not grant trust lightly, but a rare tolerance, a quiet allowance. When the worker shifted his weight to ease the strain in his legs, she did not tense. When his hand moved slowly to adjust the small light near his knee, she did not pull away. Her gaze stayed on him, steady and thin with weariness, and then she looked away again, focusing inward. The veterinarian approached carefully from behind, steps soft, boots barely pressing the grass. The lioness watched through half-lowered lids, too tired to lift her head fully. The team moved like shadows, close enough now to help, still far enough to keep her calm. They did not reach for her leg. They did not rush to touch her belly. They waited for the signs, reading the rhythm of her body the way one reads weather. Another contraction came, harder, and her throat opened in a sound so low it was almost swallowed before it left her. Her muscles tightened along her ribs and shoulders. She drew her forelegs in slightly, claws scraping the soil, making a small furrow. The worker leaned forward a fraction, voice quiet enough to be carried only by the space between them. "You're all right," he breathed. The lioness exhaled, long and shaking. Her ears flattened briefly, then lifted again. Her tail pressed into the grass. The air around her felt strangely still, as if the night's last breath had been held back. Even the insects seemed quieter. The savannah paused, not in silence but in attention. The final effort came without drama. Her body gathered into one last surge and then the tension released. In the dim light, something small emerged into the world, slick and dark against the pale grass. The cub did not cry loudly. It made only a faint, thin sound, more breath than voice, and then lay still for a moment as if stunned by open air. The lioness's head lifted again, slow, trembling. Her nostrils flared as she searched for the new scent. She drew her chin forward and touched the cub with the edge of her muzzle, a gentle press that carried no force, only recognition. Her tongue came out once, then again, cleaning with careful strokes, as if each movement mattered, as if she could not afford to waste the tenderness. The people stayed where they were. No celebration, no sudden movement. Just watching as the wild, for one quiet moment, chose peace. Morning arrived with a slow spill of light, turning the savannah from shadow to soft gold. The air was cooler now, carrying the scent of damp earth from somewhere far away, though no rain had touched this patch of land. Dew clung to the grass tips and caught the sunrise in tiny flashes. The long night's tension eased, not because danger had vanished, but because the world had shifted into a gentler hour. The lioness lay still at first, her breathing deeper than it had been, though still heavy with strain. Her coat was darkened in places, streaked with blood and dust along her hindquarters. The injured leg remained stiff, held with careful distance from the ground. Beside her, the cub lay close to her belly, small enough to be hidden by the curve of her body and the surrounding stems. Its movements were weak and searching, tiny paws flexing against the earth, nose pressing into warmth as if following instinct alone. The conservation worker remained nearby, shoulders relaxed from exhaustion, eyes never leaving the pair. The veterinary team stood farther back, near the vehicle, speaking only in murmurs that barely reached the grass. There was no rush to intervene now. Any sudden approach could scatter what fragile balance had been earned through the night. The lioness lifted her head and looked toward the taller grass in the distance, where cover thickened and shadows still lingered. She blinked slowly, then lowered her muzzle to the cub. Her touch was firm but careful, a steady nudge that guided the newborn closer to her chest. The cub shifted and wriggled, uncoordinated, its body still adjusting to gravity and air. A faint sound escaped it, soft, brief, and quickly swallowed by the morning breeze. The lioness gathered herself with visible effort. Her forelegs pushed against the soil, shoulders trembling as she tried to rise. For a moment she faltered, her injured leg refusing to join the motion. Her body swayed and the grass around her bent under her weight. She paused, breathing through the strain, eyes narrowed not with aggression but with concentration. Then, slowly she tried again. When she stood, it was not graceful. It was stubborn and careful, a body held upright by will more than strength. Blood stained her thighs. Her tail hung low. The injured leg hovered just above the ground, barely touching, her weight shifted forward to protect it. Yet she remained standing, ribs lifting in steady breaths, head held level as she checked the space around her. The cub lay where it had been, too small to follow at once. The lioness turned back and lowered her muzzle, nudging it again, then again, guiding it to move. The newborn tried, wobbling forward in short, unsure efforts, its legs folding and straightening as if learning in real time. Each time it slipped, the lioness waited. She did not hurry it. She only watched, then offered another gentle push. The human stepped back instinctively, giving her the path without claiming it. No hands reached out. No one moved to block her. They stood still in quiet respect, understanding that the greatest help now was distance. The worker's eyes stayed soft, his posture open, as if promising he would not follow closer than she allowed. The lioness began to limp toward the taller grass, each step measured, each pause deliberate. The cub followed in small bursts, stopping often then catching up again. The light grew brighter, and the savannah woke around them. Birds rising from low branches, insects humming, the distant movement of herds far beyond the frame of this moment. At the edge of the tall grass, the lioness halted and looked back once. Not as a farewell, not as gratitude, but as a final assessment of safety. Then she turned and vanished into the green gold cover, her cub disappearing after her like a shadow pulled into the earth. What remained was only the open plain, bright and ordinary again. Yet the people stayed still, holding the silence a little longer, as if afraid to disturb the memory of something rare, life refusing to fade, and the wild, for one morning, allowing itself to be witnessed.